All right, so in this episode, we're gonna be driving through West Columbia as well as Cayce. These are cities right here in Lexington County, right outside of Columbia, South Carolina, here in the Midlands of South Carolina. So many of you have started to ask me about West Columbia and some of the areas in Cayce in most recent times, which is why I wanted to do this driving video. So West Columbia's downtown, to be 100% honest, has gone through probably one of the biggest transformations as far as their skyline goes, right? I've talked about a lot of the growth in Lexington with the hotels and the amphitheaters, as well as Blythewood with the Scout plant. Downtown stuff has come, but you'll see when we get to downtown West Columbia, the skyline, how it's changed a lot. And I'll talk about what it used to be and the things that are new, obviously, now. As well, I'll show you during this trip, we're gonna take you over to where Lexington Medical Center is. I know so many of you ask about where the hospitals are in the area. And where we kind of wrap up, we're gonna pass Lexington Medical Center and kind of take it to where this bumps into essentially Lexington. So you'll see that kind of cross point, give you an idea where all these things are relative to each other. And we'll be driving through some neighborhoods as well, and I'll talk about some pricing in the area. But to get started where we started, and to the left here is gonna be Dunbar, and that's gonna take you over to where the airport is at, the Columbia Metropolitan Airport. Either way, where we got started up, if you watched my driving through South Lexington video, we drove through Pillion, Swansea, and Gaston. So right behind us, or what we passed in the beginning, was Interstate 26, heading towards Charleston and up to Greenville, as well as I-77, heading towards Northeast Columbia, Fort Jackson, eventually Charlotte. Either way, I'm gonna talk about some of the basics of the area. But before I do, on the right was gonna be a shopping center. It has Food Lion, furniture store, there's a bar and grill, and then this next shopping center up here, you're going to have a Summit Adventure trampoline park for those that like trampoline parks in the area. And then making a right here will also take you down to where Steel Hands Brewing, that we'll drive past later as kind of Cayce City Hall. And again, we'll drive past all that later. But coming up ahead, the other thing I want to talk about, and then I'll circle back to population, is going to be the Cayce Motor Speedway. You're going to probably catch eye of it as we kind of come around this corner here. So either way, this was a former NASCAR racetrack, and now it just offers a large grassy field for concerts, festivals, and other events. Now, I can say we personally haven't been, but I can tell you, I can recall that they've done outdoor movies where they put up the inflatable and do movies there at the track. As well, there was a really big festival back when we had the total eclipse back in 2017, and here it comes up on the right hand side. And going back to that total eclipse, it was a pretty wild time. So because they said Columbia itself, the region, planned over 120 eclipse related activities, and I'll tell you why in just a second. I know that we personally went to a concert the weekend before at the Senate downtown, and no, it wasn't Bonnie Tyler doing Total Eclipse of the Heart, but it was a Pink Floyd cover band doing the entire Dark Side of the Moon. But leading up, they had a Foo Fighter cover band and some others. Either way, the day of the eclipse, back then I was on the ambulance. It wasn't my day to be on shift, but they made pretty much everybody come in on standby because the South Carolina Department of Parks and Recreation Tourism reported that 1.6 million people traveled to or within South Carolina to witness the eclipse in the path of totality. And obviously Columbia being the highlight spot of it, we just got so many people. And so I personally, we were standby over at the dam, so got to overlook the lake and watch it as there were tons of people lined up across the dam. Thankfully, we didn't deal with any incidents. I know they had some stuff, of course, at the concerts, always happens. But either way, going back, let's talk about the population of the areas. And then as we kind of move forward, I'll talk about some of the things that we're passing on the way. On the left would have been an old Kmart, but obviously no more Kmart, but some of that stuff has switched around. But either way. So we'll get started with West Columbia. And interesting enough, going backwards, it was formerly known as Brooklyn. You'll actually see some churches, business, and schools that still come around the name, and they've done some wall art talking about that. As well, you'll see oftentimes it called New Brooklyn because the post office, what I found out, called it that because there was already another town that held the name Brooklyn. Either way, to give you an idea, it's 9.47 square miles, population is 17,416, which brings in a total of 1,873.49 people per square mile. So kind of a little more densely populated than some of the other areas we've talked about. Cayce. Technically, we're in Cayce now. We'll be crossing into West Columbia a little bit later. 17.74 square miles, 12,528 population, which is 816.36 people per square. mile. So a little less densely populated than per se the West Columbia area is. Either way, so as we come up here, as you can see, some fast food, Freddy's frozen custard, McDonald's, Arby's. We'll be kind of looping this corner here. And on the right-hand side, you're gonna pass one of those Walmart neighborhood markets, right? So not the big super Walmarts, just those neighborhood markets that they kind of put in. We have a couple around the area. On the left is gonna be some restaurants you're gonna have over there. Old Red Lobster, I don't think it's this one, but obviously Red Lobster announced closing down a lot of their places. Just Us Cafe, I haven't been, but I've highly been told it's a good place to eat. And then next corner, you're gonna see Krispy Kreme Donuts, that's where the Red Lobster was. And then coming up on the next corner, you're gonna see Krispy Kreme Donuts. And one more thing to point out before I go back to average pricing for the area, and again, we're gonna go through some neighborhoods and I'll talk about specifics, but there's actually an escape room that we went to on the left, just past this Krispy Kreme on the left side of the road. We went there, there's a handful in the area. This one was really fun. We did that as a date night with some of our friends, but either way, going back. So overall, the Cayce, West Columbia, where they loop it together, is also the airport area over by the airport in South Congaree. Their year-to-date comes in right at about 240,000. But let's break this down a little bit further. So West Columbia, since the beginning of the year, had literally a half burned down house that sold for $18,000, up to a 4,628 square foot house in the exclusive neighborhood of Quail Ridge that sold for $800,000. But the average price came in right about $250,000 in Cayce. Now let's talk about, I apologize, that was West Columbia again. Cayce, you had a 1,250 square foot unfinished house in a flood zone that sold for $50,000, up to a 3,348 square foot house selling for $515,000. The average though came in right around $238,000. All right, so as you can see, Starbucks and some other fast food in the area, but I want to talk about to the left, it's going to be Still Hope's Retirement Center. And the reason I want to bring this up, I know a lot of you haven't reached out to me for retirement centers, but I've talked to people, we get a lot of people asking about 55 and older communities, and on the right, Brooklyn Cayce High School, I apologize, but Still Hope. So a lot of people have asked me about 55 plus neighborhoods, and there's not a ton in the area. We really have two of them I've talked about before, Hulan Green, and then there's another small one. But outside of that, I feel like for a long time, these retirement homes, they do have independent living homes that they've kind of had a lock on those retirement homes. And so that's why I bring it up. Either way, again, Brooklyn Cayce High School, we're gonna pass it again later. We're gonna loop around the park here, show you Gunnar Park, but on the left you have Planet Fitness, Food Lion. Again, we'll talk about pros and cons a little bit later, but straight ahead, one of the pros is going to be Columbia, not too far. So obviously proximity to it is gonna be a big thing. And I want to dive into more pros and cons, but as we kind of loop around this park, and we're going to be making a left kind of back over to where Steel Hands Brewing is, and then circling back through West Columbia. Again, we're kind of still bordering between them. They call them the Triangle Cities because, right, you have this conversion where they all come together, Cayce, West Columbia, and Columbia. But either way, once we turn left, we're going to be going through an area you may have heard about. And you'll start to see some of the homes called the avenues. The avenues of Cayce is what we refer to. But this is often where you kind of find some of those smaller, older homes with character. And I've showed quite a few of these to some of y'all that were like, hey, I've heard about this, those looking for those older, quaint neighborhoods. You know, kind of a different version than like those Shandon houses I've talked about in the past. You know, those older homes, this is gonna be lower in price point than Shandon is, and I'll talk about it in a second, but give you an idea, homes in the neighborhood that have sold range from 1,248 square feet, fixer upper, for 111,000. It was built back in 1947, up to a 17,000 square foot, 1,700 square foot home, I should say, built in 1951 for 422,000. Now, just not to misrepresent the stats, there was an odd house out, an odd man out house, I guess is the best way to put it, 2000, because it was built in 2000. Like I said, most of these are older, and it was 2,900 square foot home selling for 450,000. Again, I'm not sure if this house replaced an old house or there was just a random lot left back then, because the majority of these houses were built back in the early to mid 1900s and some a little bit later, but obviously that one was the odd man out. And you can start to see them on either side of the road. So again, This is one of those areas I talk about. You're not gonna pull in, it's gonna be welcome to the avenues. It's just kind of those grid of homes, kind of the older style that we have. Like I said, Camden kind of similar, where you just have this kind of grid of an area, but either way, it's kind of those older establishments. Like I said, their pricing is gonna be quite a bit less than what we see over in the Camden areas, as you heard with the pricing that I gave you there. All right, again, so let's talk about some pros and cons of the area, because people always wanna know that. Like, what's the good, what's the bad? So obviously I talked about earlier, you do have some floodplains in Cayce, right? I talked about those houses that were in floodplains, and West Columbia as well. As you get closer to the river, there's actually a neighborhood, and the entire neighborhood's in a floodplain. And during Hurricane Helene, because of all the runoff from the upstate, they actually had to evacuate that neighborhood in fear that it might flood as that river rises. So that's kind of one of the negatives, the cons of the area. Of course, one of the main pros, going back to that, is the Riverwalk. There are multiple entrances to this where you can walk and bike for many miles. And after 2015, much of it was wrecked, but the benefit was that came of it is they redid many of the sections, making it better than it was. And they want to continue to grow this, where they say, you know, at some point this will all connect to Greenville and so much more. Either way, before we finish on with pros and cons, on the left coming up is going to be the turn that's going to take you over to Steel Hands Brewing. I've talked about Steel Hands, and we're going to pass another brewery in a little bit here, but tons of events there, really good beer there. Their coffee lagers, our favorite. You mix it with the pecan, whatever you want to call it, really good. But the events, we've gone out there for Halloween, we've gone out there with work, and they have concerts. Their Nashville Night Series, where they bring a bunch of artists in, play music. Always a good time there. Again, we're gonna pass by another one later on that I'll talk about. But going back to pros and cons. One of the big cons I hear from people, and you may have noticed already, is aesthetically, you can see, it's just much flatter area of the Midlands. You don't have as many of the rolling hills, and with it being more developed and established, just a bit more of that urban feel than that suburban feel some people are looking for. While there are tree-lined streets, as you can see right here, and tree-lined neighborhoods, much of the main roads just don't feel to have the same aesthetics of those tree-lined streets like you get in other established neighborhoods, like you do get in Irma, or like you get over in the Camden area. Now, one of the main pros, again, going back, and I'll talk about where we're turning, is proximity to downtown Columbia. Again, just right across the river. So whether it's those that are planning on working downtown, have a lot of people that, hey, I work downtown, it's an easy commute for me, or even college kids. Some of them stay on the West Columbia side because of that easy commute. And again, as we get closer to downtown, you'll start to understand this more with West Columbia because of all the stuff that has grown in this area. Either way, so I wanted to loop this real quick because this is going to be Cayce City Hall as well. Right there on the right-hand side is going to be where their fire station and police station is. On the left is going to be considered Granby Gardens Park. As well, they have the historic museum back behind us now. Granby Gardens Park features a covered shelter with 8 picnic tables, a stage, 4 barbecue pits, and access to electricity and water. They say it can accommodate between 80 and 100 people. Now, the other big thing I bring it up for is not just the park, but during Christmas time, they do what's called the Lights of Cayce, where you come through here and they light things up, and it's a pretty neat thing to check out. Either way, going back, I don't think I formally introduced myself for those first time watching, like, who's this guy talking as we're driving around all these different areas around Columbia. My name is Brandon. Not only a transplant here to South Carolina, but I'm a local real estate agent and I've helped over 100 people buy and sell right here in the Midlands of South Carolina, majority of them being transplants just like you, considering the area. So I come in here every single week and make videos highlighting the areas, talking about the pros, talking about the cons, talking about current pricing, the market report, and so much more. So that way you can help decide of whether or not the Midlands of South Carolina is for you. And again, we cover multiple areas. We cover Lexington, Lake Murray, West Columbia, Cayce, you're talking about to Blythewood, Elgin, and so many other areas. So again, don't hesitate to reach out. That way you don't have to go at this alone, because I know myself as a transplant, it's a lot to try and take in when you're trying to relocate to an area that you maybe know very little about. And so I often get calls from people that are like, hey Brandon, I saw this $250,000 house online and I want to learn about the area. So when you combine these videos, the driving videos, to get an idea of, okay, West Columbia, as well as those market reports, as well as those neighborhood tours. Hopefully, can piece it all together so that you can make that better decision of which area best fits. And I've talked about before, a lot of us that make videos of the area, of course, we hit Lexington, we do Irma, we do Columbia, but I've tried to hit those areas that many of you ask about, but there's not a ton of videos out. And West Columbia, Cayce was one of the big ones that I felt like there was such a lack, which I started to make videos about. Either way, as we come up here, we're going to be making a left, and I wanted to show you kind of some Zestos here and kind of this intersection, but you can't make a left here, so I cut through the parking lot. Going back, Zestos, so this Zestos here, if you've kind of followed the area for a little while, there's an iconic picture where Donald Trump actually went to Zestos. So he came and did a rally in the area for Henry McMaster. Henry McMaster, our local governor, was one of the first, claims to be the first political person to endorse President Trump. So Trump has consistently utilized that to come back and try and endorse McMaster, because going backwards, Nikki Haley was the governor, McMaster was the lieutenant governor, and so when Nikki Haley went to work in the cabinet with Donald Trump, McMaster got pulled in and became the governor. And so then obviously when that term came up, he had to then run. And so Trump came down and he did a rally for McMaster. Hey, vote for McMaster. And obviously he is our governor now, so was voted in. But during that time, he stopped by Zestos in West Columbia, and that was the Zestos that we just drove through there. And that's where that picture came from, if you've seen that. Either way, we're heading down Platte Springs Road now. If you continue going down this is going to continue through other parts of West Columbia, eventually take you right to South Lexington, the Red Bank area. If you know where the Walmart is, the new Publix, Chick-fil-A, the new shopping center that they're building across the street that I've talked about in other videos, that will eventually take you down this way. On the way, you're gonna pass places like the airport, Columbia Metropolitan Airport. Again, going back to that, I know we were moving fast when we passed Dunbar, but it does loop over to there. But ours is a metropolitan airport. It's not international, small airport, but there are a handful of airlines that do fly out of there. Our next closest airports, because people ask, are going to be either Charleston or Charlotte. We've personally flown out of both of those, and of course Greenville, Spartanburg, Greenville. But I would say personally, we've most flown out of Charlotte and Charleston when we're trying to get further away. And then those are about, call it an hour and 45 minutes, all three of them, Greenville, Spartanburg too. And then obviously you have Atlanta, which is gonna be about 3 hours from the Midlands of South Carolina, which is obviously gonna take you anywhere in the world that you want. So those are our biggest airports. Again, Columbia Metropolitan. We personally, just to be 100% honest, haven't flown out of Columbia Metropolitan, just because a lot of times we're flying, we're going back to visit family on the West Coast. And so you're taking all these connection flights where, again, we can get direct flights out of Atlanta. We've done direct flights out of Charlotte. And Charleston, we like, just because coming from LA, the busy airports, if you've ever been through LAX or you've been through Atlanta, Charleston is just such a breeze to get in and out of. So the first time we came to visit, we flew into Charleston and flew out of Charleston. And of course, we were used to that hustle and bustle, and we show up and it was a breath of fresh air going through Charleston. So we book a lot of flights out of there ourselves. And of course, then it gives you opportunity to visit Charleston. I'm gonna be doing a Charleston versus Columbia video in the future. And we'll talk about it because we consider Charleston ourselves, and I know many of you have, and a lot of people end up choosing Columbia over Charleston. Again, I'm not going to deny the fact that many have chosen Charleston. Obviously, they've grown a lot faster than we have, but I am going to compare those two because it's something that a lot of people ask about, and it was something that personally we considered ourselves, and there are many reasons that we chose not to, and I'll talk about that in this video. Either way, as we come up here, we're going to be making a right, cutting through some neighborhoods here, cutting back over to Highway 1, and when we cut back to Highway 1, it's going to kind of start really pushing us towards downtown West Columbia, so you can see what everything looks like there. And like I said, because the just change of that downtown area is just such a significant change. Either way, when we first turn down this road, you're gonna start, I know there's some kind of apartment complexes over there on the left-hand side of the road, but on the right. These homes are gonna talk about first, and we're gonna turn down the street, different set of homes. But these are probably gonna be some of your most budget-friendly homes that are livable, is the best way to put it, because I've talked about, you know, these houses that are falling down already, burned down houses, but they're coming in between $125,000 and $150,000. So we're gonna turn the corner and you're gonna start to see those houses get a little bit bigger as we turn the corner. And those ones, to give you an idea, we're not quite there yet, but I'm gonna talk about it and then I'm gonna take a little breather. as till we get down closer to West Columbia. But either way, prices kind of bump up to the mid 300s to 400s. With some of the ones on the left, as we turn here, you'll see that's the interstate crossing right across the way. And that's where that other 55 plus community is. Now that one only has about 20 homes in there. So I know, kind of squirrel moment, but just I saw it on the driving. But again, that's another 55 plus community, about 20 some homes in there. Agape Village is what it's called, much smaller. But either way, that crosses over the interstate. And so the ones on the left are gonna be obviously a bit left, just because they do kind of almost back up to the interstate is just my best. Where obviously the ones on the right, the bigger ones, tend to be a little bit higher, like I said. Either way, we still got a lot more to cover. Like I said, downtown West Columbia, we're gonna go to Lexington Medical Center, show you where that is, show you some other breweries, as well as some new restaurants that have hit the area, show you where the Riverwalk is, one of the main entrances with the amphitheater, and so much more, as well. Drive by some more homes in the area. So stand by, but I'm gonna take a breather. We'll pick back up here in just a little bit. And again, real quick, obviously this section pops back over similar to the first section we drove by. Hopefully this gives you a better idea of what the homes look like in that $150,000 range. I've showed quite a few of these homes in the area. Remember, keep in mind that some areas do have floodplains. So if you see some homes that are like, wow, these homes are just super inexpensive, that may be why. So of course, that's where we can help out. Don't hesitate to reach out and we can talk to you about where these floodplains are. Of course, not to try and just be a sales pitch here. You can go on the FEMA site and it shows you the floodplains. It's not like, but of course, a lot of people ask us like, hey, can you help guide us as we try and narrow through these things? Either way, turn on Highway 1 here. Gonna turn on Highway 1 here, and as we do, a couple different things here. On the left, obviously you see the Waffle House. On the right-hand side, fireworks store, and then typically, I don't know why it hasn't yet, maybe this year it isn't, usually turns into Halloween store. Now I did record these before the grass turned. I've talked about this so many times. Obviously our grass dormants, and so I knocked all of these out before it dormanted, so the Halloween store just might not be there yet. But as you see, you also have Walmart, some other fast food. There's a Hobby Lobby in this area. There's a Chick-fil-A. You just have a ton of different shopping for the area. So obviously, depending on where you live, is where you're going to, this is where you're gonna do a lot of your shopping. Again, you have Sonic you see on the side. I believe there's going to be a Walgreens or CVS. I know going back and forth with those. Rite Aid, all those kind of combined, and I'm trying to figure out it. Starbucks, again, just a lot of shopping in this area here. Yeah, so pop out again, and on Cayce, that's the other thing, grocery store. So again, hopefully gives you a kind of idea as you're driving through here and seeing what you're seeing. But we're gonna continue on, and I'll pop back on in just a little bit here. All right, so forgive me with not paying attention to the roads here, but going to the left, both of these kind of essentially take you to eventually downtown Columbia. On the left, eventually it turns into what feels like more of an interstate, just kind of a wider highway, faster. Turns into Jarvis-Clattman. Obviously this way I'm gonna take you because we wanna go check out downtown West Columbia again, but hopefully gives you a little bit of proximity as we kind of, basically what we did is as we came into Cayce, then we're kind of just paralleling back and forth, checking out the different areas to give you that best perspective of the entire Cayce as well as West Columbia side. But at the end of this is where we'll hit downtown West Columbia. All right, so this intersection here, just to give you reference kind of again to the right there was Zesto's. That's where the sign is that says Triangle City, because they all kind of converge together. And again, this is going to take us to downtown West Columbia, their main street here in just a second. So on the left there, that is Whataburger. Not the Whataburger, we're starting to get them now, but another Whataburger with the same name. Also on the left, the Weco sign. So I don't know the backstory of this one, I don't. But the Weco, I started to hear it recently. Everyone's like, hey, can you tell me about Weco? And I was like, Weco? And obviously West Columbia, as a lot of these places try and coin, districts. And so Weco, and then it was announced that they relit the Weco sign there in West Columbia, and that's what that is back there. Either way, you can start to see as we get closer to Columbia with the skyline in the distance. So we're kind of coming down to where a lot of this has changed. And I'm gonna talk about it now and then point out a couple different things. Actually, we're picking up to it really fast, but you're gonna see on the right, here's the other brewery I was talking about, Savage Craft Brewery. That's gonna be right here on the right. So very similar when it comes to Steel Hands, where they do music there, events. They got an upstairs overlooking, and then they got the downstairs where they play the music. Really cool spot. As well, they also have a little venue center where they do farmers markets. So they have farmers markets in the area. But this entire section right here, another Broken Egg, that whole building, all of this is brand new. And on this corner, I'm gonna talk about that as well. So you have Black Rooster, and it's gonna be on this next section, and it overlooks the Columbia skyline and the river that we're gonna pass as we turn here down to the side. So you got the river amphitheater down there to the left where you can access the river walk, but either way, Black Rooster. So Black Rooster started as an Italian restaurant, really good Italian restaurant, and not Italian, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, a French restaurant. And across the street was a place called Owl's Upstairs, really good Italian place. We actually went there for my wife's birthday, I believe, one year. Really good Italian food. Owl's Upstairs closed. The guy that owns Black Rooster said, hey, look, I've always wanted to do Italian, but I was never gonna try and compete against Al. Now that he's decided to retire and close down, they switched Black Rooster to Italian as well. He said French cuisine just didn't hit with. So we ended up going, once they switched it, really good food there. So definitely worth checking out. On the left, you're gonna have some very upscale homes that overlook the river there. But with that said, again, I am gonna go back to that downtown change and everything over there, but I wanna talk about homes down here in West Columbia, and that's why I drove through this section here, because I had a lot of people asking about this, simply because of the convenience to be able to walk to the restaurants, the breweries, and the local events. And I would say this is kind of what you call an area in transition, where you got investors coming into this area, and I've been in a handful of these homes here. Majority of these homes date back to the early 1900s. Many of them, unfortunately, are not in great shape. A lot of the ones I walk through just need a lot of love. Not just paint and flooring. I'm talking about, new flooring. The subfloors are falling through. They still have window units, air conditioned in a 2-story house. But of course, you've had some investors that have come here and flipped these, and some of them I've even been told turned into Airbnbs. But to give you an idea though, you have homes ranging from $125,000 on those that need some love to $395,000 on a 2160 square foot house built in 1930. As well, in the midst of this, they built St. Anne's Alley, single family Charleston style homes back in 2020. I remember when they first built these, showed them a couple times. Either way, last year, 1,090 square feet for $288,000 up to 1,161 for $300,000. Either way, we pulled back onto West Columbia's Main Street. So on the left, you're gonna see a couple different things. Cafe Strudel. If you watch any of my videos, there is a Cafe Strudel over in Lexington. This was the original one, and then they built that one over there. Couple other things. So there used to be New Brooklyn Tavern over here. Obviously, I mentioned with the name with New Brooklyn Tavern or New Brooklyn. This was known as one of the oldest, if not the oldest, running music venues in the area. But not too long ago, they ended up closing down. They moved over to, the building ended up, the lease, they ended up losing, and they ended up moving over to 5 Points into the larger and historic Cotton Gin building. You also have a Hot Works Yoga over there. You used to play a place called 118 State. We were highly recommended, went when we first moved here. It's gone now. It's a place called the Hideout. Personally haven't been there. Either way, that whole downtown area we just checked out. Again, I always told people, there used to be nothing worth going down there for. I guess is the best way to put it. There was that main street, and they had, you still had what I talked about with 118 State and Cafe Strudel, but outside of that, there wasn't much, and that's a chicken plant on the right for those asking, wondering what that is. And so either way, there wasn't much outside of that. It wasn't really a thriving downtown. And then obviously they came in with this revitalization, and that whole section you saw where Another Broken Egg was, they built apartment complexes in there. They built where, like I said, Black Rooster was, tons of parking over there, where you had the brewery come in, and then when they started doing the section where they have the farmers markets, and it just changed drastically, that entire downtown area. Again, not to discount Lexington's revitalization with the amphitheater coming and such like that, but just the landscape of it, because again, there was nothing really there on that corner where you saw that whole entire section where Another Broken Egg was, all the way to Black Rooster. That was nothing. And so that's why I say it's been such a revitalization, which is why a lot of people have been asking about it. And hey, tell me all about this area a lot more. Either way, we are now heading towards Lexington Medical Center. So obviously, as we kind of left, we're kind of paralleling back to the roads that we were on earlier. And we're gonna drive down to where Lexington Medical Center is. And then, like I said, we're gonna continue on to show you where it kind of hits Lexington. Hopefully give you a proximity for those that, hey, maybe we're not living in West Columbia, but we want to go check out Black Rooster. We want to try this Italian place that you've talked about. We want to go to maybe one of the breweries over there. Hopefully this can give you a perspective as we get down towards the end here where this is in proximity. And I'll talk about one more con as we get closer to Lexington Medical Center, because that whole area right there, oh my gosh, the congestion. You'll see it in this driving part as they come up here, how obnoxious it gets. Just not really a well-planned interchange. And if you've been to the area, you know they're working on the interstate down there. They even had to create a new off-ramp for 378, which is what this is going to be, because it would back up onto the interstate for so long because of all the congestion at this next intersection that we're going to come up in just a little bit here. Unfortunately, and this is what I've been told, obviously I don't know the entire details of it, but so let me give you kind of an idea, and maybe you've been to the area and maybe you've seen this, maybe not. So the interstate comes and you got 378, and then you'll see the hospital on the right hand side, and you're probably looking at this in reverse because I know I'm reverse when I'm doing this. But it comes up and then the main entrance is there. There is a part where you could easily exit and get to the hospital from the back side. And continuing on is where Hulan Green is going to be, that 55 and plus older community I was talking about. It sits right behind the hospital, convenient, right? And I'll talk about that in just a second. And so either way, everyone was like, why don't they just put an exit right there so people that are going to the hospital, going to Hulan Green, there's like a back way around. And what I had been told is they tried to get Lexington Medical Center to pay for it, and Lexington Medical Center said no, and so now you don't have any exits, so now you got all this congestion. I don't know. Again, that's what I was told. Don't know if it's the truth, but either way, just the reality of it. Riverbanks. So the Riverbank Zoo over in Columbia, obviously the main entrance off of 126. The garden main entrance is on this side. If you're in the zoo, you can cross the bridge and get to the garden side. But if you just want to go to the botanical gardens, the entrance is on this side over here. Again, this is where we're pulling up to where the hospital is, and you'll start to see it on the right-hand side, Lexington Medical Center. Obviously, those new to the area, and I will get back to Hulan Green. But those new to the area, obviously our biggest hospital we have is Prisma Health, which is going to be downtown, which I just recently did a video about it. Obviously we just were down near Columbia, and you saw, so call it 15 minutes from this area to where Prisma Health is, the main hospital. It's gonna be your children's hospital, main trauma center, heart hospital, and all of that. Then you also have Lexington Medical Center, obviously here, that we're gonna be passing, and they also have another facility in the northeast part of Columbia. And then you also have MUSC. They bought a hospital system called Providence Health, And so they have a downtown one, as well as they have one in Northeast Columbia, as well as they have one out in Camden and Kershaw County. Just recently did a driving video about that area. And then last, you have the Dorn VA Hospital, which is gonna be in Columbia, kind of on the side where Fort Jackson is, off of I-77 just about. And so that's kind of our major hospitals to the area. Either way, again, going back to Hulan Green, the reason I wanted to bring it up and what reminded me of what I said there when I said right next to the hospital is, so of course, like I said, these nursing homes seem to have this lock on the 55 and older. What really happened is I got with one of the builders, and they're actually the builders that do Del Webb. And I said, why don't we have them? Is there not a desire? What's going on? They said, no, there's plenty of desire. The problem is, in order to build these communities, they have a lot of stipulations. The main stipulations is they have to be within proximity to the hospitals as well as to grocery shopping, because obviously they don't want them traveling all around. And so you have to find enough area to be able to fit these, and obviously trying to find land next to these hospitals, as you can see, are more densely populated areas. So it's very hard to find areas for them to be able to build these within that. As well, one of the big struggles that Del Webb has specifically is, if you've never learned about Del Webb, they have some down in Charleston, down in other areas, but they have a ton of amenities. And because of that, they want 250 acres to be able to put all these amenities in that. And again, as you can imagine, trying to find 250 acres within proximity to grocery stores and to hospitals has just been something that they haven't been able to do. Now, they're working diligently and really hard on this, and they told me that they're getting closer every day. So I don't doubt in the future we will start to see some 55 plus communities come up again. But as of right now, there aren't any new ones, because to give you an idea, Hulan Green and Agape Village were built back early 2000s. I would say right around 08 kind of time frame, if I remember correctly, looking at them last time. Like I said, Hulan Green is the bigger one. Agape Village is much smaller. Outside of that, what I say we do have, for those that are interested, is we have homes that are geared towards it. And what I mean by that is there are patio style homes where your front yard maintenance and annual pressure washing is included. So you get the perks of it, but it's not 55 exclusive. And so that's kind of the best bet we have now. So obviously, as you can see, Lexington Medical Center there on the right. They have their emergency room there. Both my kids were born at Lexington Medical Center, so they do have the birthing center there. They recently did an expansion, which was really nice. Our kids were born after both of them? Can't remember. Can't specifically remember when the expansion was, but the second one we kind of lucked out, because he was born, I guess, lucked out right around COVID times. And so there was like no one in the hospital. And so of course everyone was getting private rooms at that point, because the old hospital did have shared rooms. Now again, he was born in the new area, and so we probably would have had private rooms either way. But again, they did the expansion, so it's much bigger now. We've been very happy with our care there, but obviously I know insurance kind of dictates where a lot of people go. But so that's Lexington Medical Center back there with their expansion. Talked about before, because a lot of people say, okay, here we are. The rest of Lexington, as you see as we get down, is going to be much more west of this. And so there's kind of a gap as you get further and further into Lexington, again backwards, into Lexington till you get to Lexington Medical Center. Lexington Medical Center has purchased 2 different pieces of land. One of them is going to be off of Longs Pond Road, right off of Longs Pond in the interstate. And the other one is pretty much right off the interstate at Highway 1. And so they've not made announcements of what they're going to do with those pieces of land, but they're own them. We don't know if they're just trying to make land grabs and trying to prevent Prisma and MUSC from making moves that direction. Originally, we were told, I think part of it, I'll go backwards with this story again as we get closer to Lexington, I'll point it out, is when I first moved to the area, I worked for the county on the ambulance, and we used to do the state of the counties, and their projection was everything was going to move west in Lexington, and that at some point right around that Longs Pond area, if you watch my Lexington video, I took you over to where they put the Lexington County Emergency Headquarters. They thought that was going to be the center of town and everything was going to move west. But as I talked about, everything kind of moved south in Lexington first, because that's just where the land kind of came available. And so either way, that's when Lexington bought that land, because hey, if this is going to be the center of town, we should probably own land here for when that day comes. Well, obviously, as I said, most of the stuff kind of moved south before it moved west. And so we don't know if that's why they said, let's go buy that way, just because maybe it's going that way and they're just kind of playing it out, or what. Again, They don't really have answers when everyone asks what you're doing. They say, we don't have any plans, and all they're doing is buying the land. Either way, as you can see, traffic again in this area right here. And again, what this goes to is crossing the interstate, Highway 378. Talked about it earlier when I said it. So this turns into Sunset Boulevard, Highway 378 on the Lexington side. We're going to be coming up and you're gonna see the interstate. And when we get to the interstate, if you just cross right across the way, that's gonna be where the Chick-fil-A is, the turn to Corley Mill Road, taking you down to Saluda River Club, as well as River Bluff High School, and all of the neighborhoods right there by River Bluff High School. So that's just on the other side of the interstate, what we're coming up to here. So hopefully that puts into perspective, again, give you a better idea of where we are in comparison, where West Columbia is, where Cayce is, and where all those places are, again, compared to Lexington itself. You know, if you decided maybe West Columbia, Cayce weren't for you after watching this, I've made an entire video breaking down all parts of the Midlands of South Carolina. A playlist, I should say, and so you want to check that out because I talk about all the Irmo that we talked about, Chapin, Lexington that I talk a lot about, and the northeast parts of Columbia, Blythewood that we talked about, the Shandon areas, around Columbia, the university, all those things. So you can get a better idea of which area best suits for you and your family.